Okay, so I'm recording this, just making sure. All right, so hi everyone. Well, today we are going to go through, so this is the third lab for basic plant science, and today we're going to go through the leaf. So the last class we covered the plant stem pretty intensively. We talked about the plant body in general. We talked about primary versus secondary growth, dicot versus monocot stems, and then some variations and adaptations on the stem. And so today we're going to focus on the leaf. So functions of the leaf form, so the internal and external anatomy of leaves, dicot stem versus monocot. Sorry, that should say, oops, that should say dicot leaf versus monocot leaf. That's what that should say. And then the variation and adaptation of the leaf. So leaves come in a great variety of different shapes. Here is just some examples of the 400,000 plants in the plant kingdom, right? So this is just a subset. But you could see there's a lot of different shapes, different sizes, different colors, etc. Here's just a few more examples. You could see some of the leaves have a single thing. Some of the leaves have many, many different things, right? So like I'll annotate because I'm so awesome at annotating. Here, let's use pink, right? So like here, this leaf only has a single thing to it, whereas something like this has many things to it, right? So there's different types of leaves, and we'll talk about what those things are as we move forward. So, and this is yet another example of how many shapes and sizes that leaves come in. And believe it or not, in this slide, all of these leaves are actually all from ferns. So only one type of plant, right? Ferns. And all of these leaves are from different ferns. So quite a lot of diversity in leaf shape. Leaves also come in a variety of sizes. So this is actually the smallest plant from the angiosperms that we know of. It's from the family Lemnaceae. And so each of these plants are only about a millimeter or two wide. And so you can see the leaves themselves are really, really small too. On the right here, this is actually a bee that's standing on a mat of these small plants. So these small plants are aquatic, so they float in water. But you can see this bee is standing on a bunch of the floating small plants and it's able to stand on the water. And you can see the Lemnaceae is also called the Duckweed family. And so you can see there's a whole bunch of different species, genera down there at the bottom. But all of them are very, very small in size. So, yep, a lot of variety in leaf size, including very, very small leaves. But there's also really, really big leaves, as you can see here. This is from a type of plant called a gunnera. And yeah, so quite a big difference in size from being, just a few millimeters wide to like this. Yeah, there's even a type of water lily that is so large that, look, it could support the weight of a small child. So yes, leaves have all different sizes, all different shapes, but they have some things in common. For example, their functions. So let's talk about that first. So the most important function that the leaf does is photosynthesis. So photosynthesis is a process. And what happens during we talked about it briefly, but in maybe the first class, but now we're going to talk about it a little bit more in depth. So during photosynthesis, sunlight from the sun, right, and water enter the plant. So the sunlight is going to hit the plant leaves, and water is going to enter the plant from the roots. And these two things together are going to allow the plant to take carbon dioxide gas and convert it into sugar, right? So you can see sugars here, and releasing oxygen as a waste product. But the most important thing about this in terms of the leaf is that photosynthesis happens in the leaves. So leaves are where photosynthesis is occurring. Leaves are where carbon dioxide gas is entering Leaves are where the carbon dioxide via sunlight and water is going to be converted into sugars. So yeah, and then leaves are going to ultimately release the oxygen into the air. So photosynthesis, very important function of the leaf. Another really important function of the leaf is something that's called transpiration. So transpiration involves water. And the idea is, let me annotate here. And I'll use blue since we're talking about water. So you can see here, water is going to enter at the roots, right? And normally water is heavy. So normally gravity would have made it so that the water couldn't really move up through the plant past a certain height. And because of gravity would have pulled the water back down. However, the water is able to get to the very top of the plant. In fact, it's able to get to the very top of even really tall plants. For example, like really tall trees. So how does the water get all the way up there? Well, the leaves help with that. So what happens is in the leaves, I'll use black to highlight so this circle here, right? The circle here is the bottom of a leaf. And you can see that there are these holes on the bottom of the leaf that are called stomata. And these holes allow water vapor to leave the leaf. But when the water vapor leaves the leaves through these holes, it actually pulls water up from the roots and allows water to enter all of the plant. So here we go again. Here's our water entering at the roots, right? Here it is going up the stem. Ultimately, it's going to go into the leaf. And then eventually it'll actually, as water vapor, get released out of these holes called stomata. And this process, all taken together, of water vapor leaving the holes in the leaf is called transpiration. Okay. This is kind of a cool trick. So if you actually took so if you have a plant at home, if you took a plastic bag, and you cover the leaf in the plastic bag and you leave it like that for an hour or maybe even a little bit more, eventually the plastic bag is going to be all foggy from the water vapor that it has escaped out of the stomata. So this is again because of this process of transpiration, right? Transpiration, where the water vapor is leaving the holes in the leaf, right? The stomata. Okay. So what are the two most important functions of the leaf? Photosynthesis and transpiration. Now let's talk a little bit about the external form of leaves. I'm just going to pull this up so I have this to refer to in case. Okay, yeah. So leaf external form. So leaves are part of the shoot system, right? We kind of talked about the root system and the shoot system and the vascular system during the stem lab, right? And so the shoot system has stems, leaves, and flowers, right? And the leaves have, in terms of their external form, there's really two main parts. There is the petiole and the blade, or what you can also call the blade, a lamina. They're the same word. So I'll use purple, right? So here is a leaf. The stem part of a leaf is what's called a petiole. And then the green flat part of a leaf is what's called the blade or lamina. Both of those mean the same thing, so you could use whichever one you prefer. So those are the two main parts of the external form of the leaf: the blade and or lamina, blade or lamina, same thing, and petioles, the stem part of a leaf. We talked about this a little bit in the stem lab, where in that axil of the leaf, you have these axillary buds. So just to kind of refresh you on that, remember the area, I'll draw it up here, the area between the leaf and the stem is called an axil. Look, axil. And the buds that are located in that area are called axillary buds, right? There's one there, there's one there, there's one there, etc. And that's going to be, so the axillary buds that are in the axil of the leaf are what are going to ultimately make branches. I think we talked about that during the STEM lab. Okay. So blade / lamina and petiole are the two main parts of the external form of the leaf. But there's some other parts as well. So here we have the blade again. Here I'll annotate because I love it. Here, okay, so here's our petiole, right? That's the stem part of the leaf. The big part that's flat is the blade or lamina, same thing. Then there are going to be veins on the leaf. So the main vein that's in the middle is called the midrib. And the veins that come off of that are just called veins. And sometimes there'll be small veins in between larger veins, which is what this is showing you down here. Another term that's in your lab manual is stipules. So some leaves have stipules. These are the stipules here. They're just like little green pokies. Stipules, we don't really know 100% what they do. They can show up in different parts of the plant, but sometimes you'll find stipules at the base of a leaf. Okay. So this is an example of a simple leaf, right? It says it at the top, simple leaf. Simple meaning that there's only one part. There's only one main part, right? There's only this thing, one blade above the petiole, right? So this is simple leaf. But some leaves are what are called compound leaves. And when you have a compound leaf, they have, we'll go through this in the following slides, but they have more than one thing on the top. So in this case, this whole thing here is one leaf. And you would still use the same terms. So for example, the stem part down here is still the petiole. The green portion up here is still the blade / lamina, same thing. The only main difference is that instead of remember in the previous slide we had midrib, right? In this previous slide we had midrib as that central vein. Whoops, missed it. Whoops. If you have a compound leaf, you don't call it the midrib anymore. Instead, you call it the rachis. So the rachis is this part. So the rachis is kind of like the extension of the petiole into the lamina or blade, right? But it's basically the midrib of a compound leaf. Another thing that some leaves have are what are called trichomes. So trichomes are hair-like structures that serve different purposes. On the top left here with the blue background, I'll do this. These are actually, remember in the first class I told you guys that I study a plant in New York City for its evolution. These trichomes are actually present on my plant. So I took these pictures in the lab of my plant to show the examples of the trichomes that it has. It has two different types of trichomes on one leaf. It has these star-shaped trichomes, and then it has these pokey single-haired trichomes on a single leaf. But trichomes serve different purposes. So sometimes they serve to prevent things from eating the leaf because, you know, things don't really want to eat like a really fuzzy leaf. Like things like insects will be deterred and not want to eat a leaf that has a lot of trichomes on it. Sometimes they can have stinging hairs and associated with them. So they'll not only do they have a texture like the hair-like texture, but on top of that, the hairs will have a stinging quality, and that will also prevent insects from eating them. Other times, so in the case of this air plant on the right, the trichomes covering the air plant help it get, so air plants are plants that don't grow in the dirt, they grow on other plants. So if you've ever been down to the Caribbean, in parts of South America. You may have seen air plants before. Even if you've ever been to Florida, there's air plants there. And so they don't grow in soil, so they don't really have the traditional kind of roots. And in this case, the trichomes serve to kind of grab water vapor out of the air. Okay. So that's the external parts of a leaf, right? Petiole, blade or lamina. Sometimes they have trichomes. They have veins that you can see with your eye, etc. Simple leaves versus compound leaves. Let's talk a little bit more about simple leaves versus compound leaves. So that's where we're here in leaf division. So here's a group of leaves. Each of these are one leaf. And the top left one is an example of a simple leaf. So remember what I said before. A simple leaf has one part above the petiole, right? So in the case here, this is the part that it has above the petiole. So if you're holding the petiole of a leaf to play with it, woo, yay! You'll only have one part on the top of a simple leaf. If you have a compound leaf, though, there will be more than one part above the petiole, right? So in the case of this one on this side, here's a petiole, and this has three things above the petiole, right? More than one. And then in the case of this here, there's the petiole right there, and this has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, a lot of things above the petiole. So more than one part above the petiole. And this one here is similar, right? This is still one leaf. Here's the petiole. And even for compound leaves, we say this is the blade or the lamina. This is the blade or the lamina of this compound leaf. This is the blade or the lamina of that compound leaf. All right. The one on the left here, we would say that this is a palmately compound leaf. Palmately compound, in that it's kind of shaped like a hand, right? It's flat like this. So we say it's palmately compound because palm refers to hand-shaped. Other compound leaves are what are called pinnately compound. So pinna comes from the word feather, and whoever decided to say we're going to call these pinnately compound thought that these leaves kind of looked like a feather from a bird. So these are pinnately compound leaves. In the case of this leaf, this compound leaf, this is what we call 1 times pinnately compound. So here's how you tell. So if you're going up the stem of the leaf, right? If there's only one division, there you go, 1. So that's your first one, right? You say it's 1 times pinnately compound. And the leaflets are called, on a compound leaf, the leaflets are called pinna. But leaflets also fine. So this 1 times pinnately compound, whereas this one here is 2 times pinnately compound. So how do you tell? Well, you go up here, there's one division here, here's one division. But then if you go out on here, here's another division, right? So maybe it'll help, or maybe not, if I draw it. So let me try to draw. So for 1 times pinnately compound, here's your midrib, or not midrib, sorry. Here's your the stem of the leaf, as it were, right? The petiole and then the rachis for the compound leaf. If it's 1 times pinnately compound, there's only, here, I'll use this, there's only one division. So 1 times pinnately compound leaf, the leaves are going to look like, the leaflets are going to look like this, right? One division. If you're a 2 times pinnately compound leaf, oops, let's get red back. Red. For 2 times pinnately compound, here's the stem of the leaf again, right? The petiole with the rachis. You're going to have 2 divisions. You're going to have one division here, which in the case of the 2 times pinnately compound leaf on this slide is going to be like a little stem. That's the first division. And then the second division, right? We'll draw that there. Second division is going to be the smaller, oops. It's going to be the, aw, no. No. All right, let's try that again. 2 times pinnately compound leaf. There's the thing. First division is like this stem. Oh gosh. Really not good at annotating. One more try. 2 times pinnately compound leaf. The first division is this stem-like part, and then the second division would be the little smaller leaflets that are coming off of that, right? Okay. That took longer than I was expecting. So if you have a 1 times, remember, if you have a 1 times pinnately compound leaf, the leaflets are called pinna. If you have a 2 times pinnately compound leaf, the first division is called a pinna, and the smallest division is called a pinnule. So each of these little guys here, 1, 2, 3, those are each a pinnule, right? Whereas this whole thing here is a pinna. Okay. You can have more than 2 times pinnately compound. You could have 5 times pinnately compound. In this case, we have a 3 times pinnately compound leaf. So you have 3 divisions. The first division, I won't draw the stick leaf, but I will draw the divisions, right? So here's the first division is the stem. And then the second division is the stem coming off of the stem. And then the last division is the little pinnules. So in the case of a 3 times pinnately compound leaf, the largest division is considered a pinna. Second largest is called a subpinna, and then again, the smallest thing is a pinnule. Okay. So here's a group of leaves, right? Here's a group of leaves. All of these leaves have the same division. And so looking at these leaves, what do you think they would have? Think about it for a second. Well, so the first thing you got to think about is this a simple or a compound leaf, right? And all of these leaves are examples of compound leaves, right? Because there's more than one thing above the petiole, more than one thing. For some of these, it might be a little difficult to see, like the bottom three on the left might be a little difficult to see. So like let's look at this one here, right? I told you all of them have the same division. So it's compound. Is it palmately compound? Is it shaped like a palm? No. It's pinnately compound, right? Shaped like a feather. And so how many divisions does it have? Well, looks like just one, right? Just one. And so all of these leaves on this slide are 1 times pinnately compound. Here is a close-up of one of these types of leaves, right? To kind of show you why it's 1 times pinnately compound. So you can see the hand there is holding the petiole. And the entire leaf, this is one entire leaf, and it only has one division, right? The pinna, or like I said, the leaflet, same thing. All right. So we've already covered the functions of the leaf. We've already covered divisions of the leaf. We've already covered simple versus compound leaves. And now we're going to talk about leaf arrangement. Leaf arrangement. So leaves can be arranged in different ways on a plant, depending on the species. So here is one way that they're arranged. This is called opposite. So in this case, the leaves on a stem are exactly opposite of one another, right? Like that. So some of the plants that we saw during the first lab actually have this type of leaf arrangement. So on the top here is that flowering dogwood that we saw in the first lab. And as you can see on the stem, each leaf, I guess maybe I should use a different color on green. Let's use black, right? Each leaf is directly opposite another leaf on the stem. So this is called opposite arrangement. Another plant that we looked at in the first lab is that Japanese maple. And again, Japanese maple also has opposite leaf arrangement in that each leaf is directly opposite another leaf. Another word for leaf arrangement is phyllotaxy. Your lab uses that word, at least I think in one of the labs it mentions the word phyllotaxy. Leaf arrangement is fine. All right, so you have opposite leaf arrangement. And then you have alternate leaf arrangement. So in this case, instead of being opposite each other, now the leaves alternate. We have one here and then one here, and they're not opposite each other anymore, as you can see in this schematic. And again, some of the plants that we looked at in that first lab have alternate arrangement. So this is your American holly, right? The ilex. And as you can see, the leaves are not opposite each other anymore. The leaves alternate, right? They alternate. Boom, boom, boom. So this is an example of alternate leaf arrangement. You can also have compound leaves that are arranged oppositely or arranged alternately. So in the example here, this is that honey locust down on the bottom, which has a compound leaf. Here is the compound leaf. That's one leaf. And these compound leaves are also have an alternate leaf arrangement. See, they're not opposite each other. They alternate side to side. All right. So opposite leaf arrangement, alternate leaf arrangement. Next, whorled leaf arrangement. So when leaves have a whorled arrangement, they kind of go in almost like a spiral around the stem, as you can see here. Or it's kind of like this with this. So it's in two different dimensions of leaves, right? Opposite leaves would just have them going like this, then this, then this. Alternate would have this, then this, then this. Whorled has going this way and then going that way. Boom, 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 right? Told you I like to make noises. So here's some examples of whorled leaves. The one on the top is mint. Mint is known for having these whorled leaves. So again, as I said, it's going to go from this to this to this to this, right? So this one is going this way, whereas this one is like coming at us. This is going this way, right? This is coming at us. So whorled arrangement. Other times, whorled arrangement looks more like this, where instead of staggering it here and then up here, the whole dimension, all the dimensions will be in one spot, right? Like in this example shown down here, which is a type of weed called a hedge bedstraw on the bottom right there. All right. Pretty straightforward stuff so far with the leaf, right? You got simple leaf versus compound leaf. You have leaf arrangements like opposite, alternate, and whorled. Now let's talk about the venation on leaves. So leaves have, we mentioned it earlier on already with the midrib, right, and the other types of veins around it. Leaves have venation, which just refers to their veins. So here are examples of some simple leaves and their venation patterns. And what I want to draw your attention to here is, let me use, I guess I'll use green. So here you could see simple leaves, basic Venation patterns, right? And on this layer, it says netted venation. What that means is that the veins kind of spread out like a net. You can see here. And then there's little veins all through here. I don't know if you can see them. They'd be on either side. Here's one. Whoop. Here's one. Here, etc. This also has netted venation, right? So here you have a central midrib, and then the veins kind of come out like a net. But then you have another type of venation, which is called parallel. And I don't know why it doesn't say it underneath here, but this here is an example of parallel venation. All the veins are not like a net, they're parallel to each other like this. Right? Okay. So netted venation and parallel venation. Why am I telling you this? Because here's them in real plants, right? So the leaf on the bottom left has a netted venation pattern. The leaf on the bottom right has a parallel venation pattern. So here you go. Here's the midrib. Oh, I should not use green now, so we won't see it. Here is that midrib, right? And look, all of the veins go parallel down this leaf. It's an example of parallel venation. Whereas this leaf over here has that net-like venation, right? Not parallel, net-like. Okay. Sorry, my phone is going buzz. Let me move it. All right. So remember we talked about dicots and monocots during the stem lab. We talked about how they are different. Their vascular bundles are different inside of the stem. So likewise, dicots and monocots tend to have different leaf venation. So dicots tend to have that net-like, and another word for net-like venation is reticulate. You'll see reticulate in the lab. But dicots tend to have this net-like venation in their leaves, whereas monocots usually have parallel venation in their leaves. So you can tell with your naked eye whether or not something is a dicot or a monocot just by looking at the leaf venation, which is pretty cool. Now let's talk about leaf internal structure. So I was going to try to do a stomata peel demonstration here at my house, but I realized I don't really have microscope slides or cover slips. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a good YouTube video of somebody doing a stomata peel demonstration, and I'll post it in the videos folder that's on Blackboard. So now we're talking the internal structure of the leaf, right? We already talked about the external structure. Now I talk about the internal structure. So there's a lot of parts of the leaf, but not that many parts. So for example, here is a leaf, and we're going to take a little cutting of the leaf. Here, we're going to take a little cutting right here to look at under the microscope slide. So here are the different parts of the leaf, and we're going to go through each of them on the subsequent slides to talk about what they actually do. But on the very top of the leaf, so got to keep that in mind too, leaves do have like an upper surface and a bottom surface. And on the upper surface, you're going to have what's called the upper epidermis, and on the bottom surface of the leaf, you're going to have the lower epidermis. On top of the epidermis, you have a cuticle. You can't really see the cuticle on the bottom, on the lower epidermis in this diagram, but just know that on top of epidermis, you always have cuticle. So that's that. You can see it kind of being pulled up right there. Underneath the upper epidermis, you have the mesophyll cells, which we'll talk about on subsequent slides, because they're missing one here. But basically, okay, there's two types of mesophyll cells. We'll talk about that on subsequent slides. There's this here, and there's this here. And they have the one that's here labeled as spongy mesophyll cells. And these up here are called Palisade mesophyll cells. We'll talk about it on a future slide coming up. And then inside the leaf, you have a vein, which has xylem. Here's the the red is the xylem. Here's the xylem. And the phloem, the blue is the phloem in the vein. And then on the lower epidermis, you'll have stomata. So remember, we talked about stomata when we were talking about transpiration, right? So stomata are those holes that allow water vapor to escape the leaf. I'm going to close my window really quick. People are being loud. Okay, so that's an overview of the parts of the leaf. Sorry, that's an overview of the internal anatomy of the leaf. But now let's look at each of these parts to get one by one so we can understand what their functions are. So the cuticle, which is on the top of the epidermis, right, is waxy. And what the cuticle does is it helps prevent water loss by giving the leaf a kind of like a waxy coating to it, and helps water stay inside of the leaf and only escape through the stomata. The upper epidermis, so this is a cross-section through a leaf looking at it under the microscope slide. This is a real leaf as versus just a drawing. And the upper epidermis is one layer. So we talked about epidermis during the stem lab, right? And the upper epidermis is one layer. So you could see one cell layer, and it's transparent. So it allows sunlight to enter the leaf. So like here's the sun, right? And the light can, oops, hey, ooh, I didn't know I can move stuff. And the light will enter, is able to enter the leaf through the transparent upper epidermis. The upper epidermis also helps protect the leaf, right? Because it's that layer of skin cells, just like our skin cells help protect us. And as I mentioned in the previous slide, there's a lower epidermis as well. It also serves to protect, but it is more importantly the location of those stomata. So those holes that we talked about. And recall that those holes, oops, back, which are here on this top left, are where water vapor is able to leave the leaf and actually pull water through the entire plant body. So the stomatal apparatus is very important, right? Here's water, and it's able to go through the entire plant because it's being released at vapor through these holes. So I keep calling them holes, but they're a little bit more complicated than just holes. So let's look at them on this slide here. So stomatal apparatus is technically the correct way of saying this. And what each stomatal apparatus, so here's one. So we're looking here at the bottom of a leaf, right? This is the lower epidermis with the stomatal apparatus there, right? The holes that let water vapor out. So here's another stomatal apparatus. Here's another one that is closed. Here's another one, etc. Each stomatal apparatus is composed of three things. It's composed of a hole or a stoma and two guard cells. And what the guard cells do is the guard cells can swell and get smaller to regulate whether or not the hole is open. So if the plant is well watered and it's not worried about drought or anything, the guard cells will be open and allow water vapor to leave through the hole. However, if the plant is in kind of like a droughty condition and it doesn't want to lose water vapor, the guard cells will close the hole and prevent water vapor from leaving. So this is what it looks like if you were looking at the bottom of a leaf. Let's look at what it would look like under the microscope slide. So this is a cross section through the leaf, just to get you oriented. These black. This is that upper epidermis. This is the lower epidermis. And then look, so here, I'll use a different color. Here, there's a hole right there, and there's a hole right there. And on the sides of that hole are guard cells that help, that either open or close the hole. So if we go to the previous, just to make this clear, I'll use the same colors. So in this here's a hole, right? That's a hole, that's a stoma. Can't draw a straight line. And each stoma is surrounded by two guard cells. So there's one there and there's one there. And that's what, see, the guard cells almost kind of look like a donut, right? These are each guard cells. Cool. Yeah, so that's what this is showing you here, right? Each of these stomatal apparatus has a hole or the stoma and a guard cells on each side to open and close the hole, depending on how much water the plant has. Okay. So those are those functions of those parts, right? Cuticle, lower epidermis, upper epidermis, stomatal apparatus. Now we'll talk about the mesophyll layer. So the mesophyll layer is the part that I was telling you on that first slide that's composed of two parts. But before we talk about the parts it's composed of, let's talk about its function. So the mesophyll is really important because in the leaf, the mesophyll layer is what actually performs photosynthesis. So here is our leaf again. I'll do this. Here's our leaf again. Here's the upper epidermis. Here's the lower epidermis, right? Here's a vein inside of the leaf. And then the mesophyll is basically, well, most of the leaf. Most of the leaf is actually composed of mesophyll cells. And that is where photosynthesis is going to occur. So inside of each mesophyll cell, so here's one mesophyll cell, you can see all these green globs inside. And what those green globs are these pigments called a chloroplast. And the chloroplast is the part of the plant cell that is able to take, remember, CO2 from the air and use water and sunlight to convert it into sugar. So that process of photosynthesis occurs in a chloroplast. And the chloroplasts are located in the mesophyll, right? Inside of the mesophyll cells. Right? So this is just a recall of the process of photosynthesis in case you needed a reminder. And then this is what I was saying before about how the mesophyll is actually made up of two layers. So here is our same leaf again, right? Here's your upper epidermis up here. Here's your lower epidermis right here. And then the majority of the inside of the leaf is what is that mesophyll layer, right? So we can see here mesophyll. The top part where they're kind of like vertical long cells is called the Palisade Layer of the mesophyll. And then the part underneath it where it's a little less organized and it's kind of more random is called the Spongy layer of mesophyll. The reason it says parenchyma, don't worry too much about that for a lab, but it says parenchyma because that's the name of the cells that make those layers up, but you don't need to know that. Just know the mesophyll layer is the part of the leaf that actively makes photosynthesis occur, right, because it has the chloroplast there. And know that the mesophyll layer is made up of these two other layers, right? The Palisade layer, which is on the top, more organized, and the Spongy layer, which is on the bottom of the leaf and less organized. All right. Next, we'll talk about the veins. So by now, we should be a little comfortable with xylem and phloem because we talked about them during the STEM lab quite a bit. But just as a reminder, so veins are where the xylem and phloem are inside of the leaf. And as a reminder, xylem transports water, right, from the roots to the leaves, and phloem transports sugar made from photosynthesis from the leaves to the rest of the plant, right? So let's look at what it looks like. So here's that same leaf again, right? Just to get you oriented, right? Here's the upper epidermis, here's the lower epidermis. Here is the mesophyll layer, right? With the Palisade mesophyll on the top, Spongy mesophyll on the bottom. And then here is your vein, right? Here is your vein. In the case here, this is the mid-rib, right? Or the mid-vein. The red part is the xylem, and the kind of aqua-colored part is the phloem of that vein. Let's look at a different leaf. So here's a different leaf, and we could still see a lot of the same structures. So I give you this leaf unlabeled and then labeled on the subsequent slide. But I always like to start with going with the epidermis. So here's the upper epidermis. Here's the lower epidermis. Here is, I'll draw it over here so I don't, here's the Palisade mesophyll. Here's the Spongy mesophyll. And then each of these things, here is a vein, here is a vein, etc. So I'll give you this slide that's unlabeled to help you kind of put the pieces together, but then here's the labeled slide on the next one, right? All the parts I was just saying. Ooh, do I go close up on the stomata? Yeah, ooh, I do, and I go close up on a vein too. So let's get closer, the higher magnification. So we're gonna look at, actually, we're gonna do a close-up of this area right here. Yep. So this is a close-up of that vein. You can see the xylem always stains kind of a reddish color. The phloem is this kind of aqua color. And then check out this lower epidermis down here on the bottom. It's kind of cool because you could actually see the guard cells. I'll use the same colors I used before. So here is that stomata. Here's the hole, right? And then on each side is a guard cell. So there's a guard cell right there, and there's a guard cell right there of that stomatal apparatus. Pretty cool in the lower epidermis. Okay, so remember when I was talking about leaf venation and how you can tell a dicot and a monocot stem apart? Or sorry, not stem, leaf, monocot and dicot leaf apart by looking at the veins? Because the dicots have that net-like venation, whereas the monocots have that parallel venation. Well, you can see that with the naked eye, but if you were to do a cross-section of the leaf, you could actually see that in the microscope slide. So let me show you. So look here. On the bottom, it says the veins of the monocot leaf are all seen in cross-section because they're parallel pattern, right? Parallel pattern. Here, let me get some markers. This could help. 1 second. Yes. Okay, so pretend these are veins, right? These are veins of a leaf. And so if you have parallel veins, right? So here's my parallel veins. They're all parallel to each other. And I do a cut through the leaf to do a cross section. When I look at that cross section underneath the microscope, all the veins are going to be pointing at me because they were parallel to each other, right? And so that's what we see here on this monocot leaf. Whereas if you have a dicot leaf where the veins are not parallel, right? They're kind of like, I guess I should use the same orientation. The veins are like this, not parallel. If you're in a dicot leaf, they're like kind of like this. If I was to do a cross section through the leaf, maybe like one vein would be pointing at me, but then the other veins are going to be going off in different directions. So they're not all going to be pointing at me like they were in the monocot leaf, right? In the monocot leaf, they're all pointing at me because they're parallel. So let me show you what I mean. Here you go. So on the top in red, each of those red circles is showing you a vein in a monocot leaf because they're all facing you because they're all parallel. Whereas on the left here, the purple circle is showing you one vein, whereas the purple rectangle is kind of showing you like the side of a vein because it's in a dicot leaf and the veins are not parallel. All right. Believe it or not, we are almost done. This is a relatively short lab compared to the ones we've had before. So now we're just going to go through a few variations and adaptations of the leaf. So some leaves are succulent in that they help store water. So a lot of your desert plants and plants that live in very hot environments might be succulent leaves, like a cactus. Also like a cactus, sometimes leaves have evolved spines, and the spines help protect the plant from herbivores, right? From things wanting to eat the leaf. If you're not going to want to eat a leaf if it's covered in spines. Some leaves have actually evolved for food storage. So believe it or not, an onion is actually leaves. So each of these parts of an onion, oh yeah, it's labeled for you here, leaves. Each layer of an onion is actually a leaf, believe it or not. It's true. And the stem tissue of the onion is only at the very, very bottom. Likewise, garlic is also an example of modified leaves. So each of these things are modified leaves for food storage. And a lot of your spring bulbs, so your daffodils and your tulips and your hyacinths, all of your favorite spring bulbs are also examples of that modified leaf. So some leaves store water, some leaves have evolved to have spines, some leaves have evolved to store food. And then we did come in contact with this during that first lab. Some leaves actually help attract pollinators, and if that's the case, we call them bracts. So here's an example, here's a bunch of examples of flowers. However, as you might remember with we'll use yellow. As you might remember from that first lab with flowering dogwood, this white part is actually a leaf. This is a leaf. The flower itself is only this little ball, right? And these white parts surrounding the flower are leaves that we call bracts. Likewise, you might remember from the STEM lab, we saw the crown of thorns plant. This here is from the crown of thorns plant. And again, only this circle in the middle is the flower. The red parts, surrounding that are actually bracts, modified leaves. The most common of these that you've most likely come into contact with are these around the holidays. People use poinsettias to decorate, and the red leaves on the poinsettia, people think of that as a flower, but that's actually, again, these bracts. And then look at this cool one on the top left. This is called the bat flower. Super, super cool. But the wings of the bat flower, as it were, these parts in the back here, are actually also bracts. And then if you've ever been in the Caribbean, you may have seen this plant. It's a bougainvillea, and the purple parts surrounding, so the flowers are these little white things, and those purple parts surrounding the white things are actually leaves. Again, these bracts. So sometimes leaves help attract pollinators. And sometimes leaves help the plant make more of itself via cloning. So this is a plant that's called Mother of 1,000 Devils, believe it or not. And each of these, so this is a leaf, this is a close-up of a leaf here. This here is a close-up of a leaf. Here's one leaf here. And on the edges of these leaves are these little, what we call propagules, leaf propagules. And each of these things is actually a new plant. And so each of these things will fall off. You can see them here. And each of them will grow into a whole new plant. It'll be a clone of the plant that it came from, but it's capable of making many, many, many thousands of clones of itself. And we call that leaf propagules. Here on the top right, they're actually purple. The pink. Propagules are pink. So each of those will fall off and grow into a whole new plant. Very cool. All right. Got just a few more slides. So then another type of leaf adaptation are aquatic leaves. So these allow plants to live in the water. So they have certain characteristics about them that allow the plant to live in the water, often submerged, right? Completely submerged. And then this is a super fun one. Maybe you guys have heard of things like this before, right? Carnivorous plants. So some leaves have actually evolved to be able to capture prey, right? Small insects, sometimes even small mammals, for the plant to consume. So these plants live in environments where there's not a lot of nutrients. It's really hard for the plant to get the nutrients it needs. And so in order to get nutrients, it actually consumes small organisms, right? Living animals. And so here you have Venus flytrap on the top left. Then you have a type of pitcher plant on the top right, another pitcher plant on the bottom right, and something called a sundew on the bottom left. So you can see, look at that crazy leaf. And each of those little sticky globules will actually help trap the insects that's going to eat. So some leaves have evolved to store water. Some leaves have evolved spines for protection. Some leaves have evolved to store food. Some leaves have evolved to be able to live in water. And some leaves have evolved to be able to catch insects, which is pretty crazy. All right, so leaves, right? We're talking about all these leaves. Why? Well, leaves are pretty important to us. We actually eat a lot of leaves. You might not even think about it. Some of us might need to, like myself, might need to eat more leaves than I eat on the daily, right? Leaves are good for you. Here's some examples of leaves that we do eat, right? So many different types. I can't even fit them all on one slide. This is just a little group of examples, right? But mustard greens, collard greens, Swiss chard, bok choy, kohlrabi, kale, lettuce, turnip greens, endive, arugula, right? So many. Spinach, lots and lots of leaves that we eat. We also use leaves for seasoning. So a lot of the favorite seasonings that you use are actually from dried leaves. These include basil, bay leaves, right? What is that? Chevril probably. Sage, purple basil, rosemary, thyme, tarragon. What is that? Stevia, dill, cilantro, chives, fennel. Remember, garlic is a leaf. Marjoram, mint, oregano, parsley, just to name a few, right? So we use leaves to season our food. We also drink leaves, right? So I drink a lot of tea. I often drink tea when I'm teaching my class. And tea is from dried leaves of tea plants, right? Some of you maybe have had wheatgrass as a drink, and that's also from a leaf, right? And there's other examples too, but those are the ones I wanted to highlight today. Okay. Whew. So we're going to leave the leaves, right? We are leaving leaves. We are on to other things. Relatively short class today in comparison. And so there is a homework assignment due. It'll be open today at 8 p.m. on Blackboard. And it will be due on Thursday the 4th by 6 p.m. On Blackboard, just like you've done them before. And a lot of you are getting really good grades on those, so keep it up. And if you are not getting the grades you're wanting to get yet, just keep at it. Maybe take more notes during lecture, go through those lecture slides. And if you ever have any questions about any of the material, email me, okay? I'm happy to help with that. Next class on Thursday, we will do the root, which is also going to be a relatively short class. So stay tuned for the root. Thank you very much, and I'll see you guys next time.